Hey, this is Luke Drake from Geography and Environmental Studies at CSUN. I'm going to talk about StoryMap. So this is in the ArcGIS online web-based system. All right, so I'm just going to tell you about StoryMaps first. I'm going to show you how to get started making one and some tips to make really great ones. All right, so first of all, there's going to be some resources that I'll post, and be sure to check those out. For example, this page here, Getting Started with ArcGIS StoryMaps. This page here pretty much has everything you need to know about how to start a story map and to get the design just right. And this page itself is an actual story map. So let's just talk for a minute about what a story map is. We'll look here at this example of a story map of the Nuremberg Memorial Gardens. So a story map is basically a multimedia interactive web-based narrative. All right, and I'm just going to scroll through this and we see that there's pictures and we have different text options here for call outs and kind of quotations. And so in some ways it's just like a web page, right? It's like a web page that you can put photos and text and video and a lot of other interactive elements here. And what kind of makes this part of a GIS platform or Geographic Information Systems is that you can also bring in to a story map web-based Geographic Information Systems data, although that's not necessary, right? You could just kind of make a regular plain a website using photos and other materials. So I'm scrolling through this right here. When I'm going through here, this is a feature called what they call a sidecar, right? So you see how the material here, the photos on the right side stays the same while you got something that's scrolling here on the left, right? They call this a sidecar. All right, and then what you can do is you can move this interactive map around and kind of see these tour points here. So there is a lot of different functionality for story maps, and it's very scalable for a lot of different skill sets. So if you have very limited experience working with creating websites, it's pretty much a plug and play template that you can do. If you have very limited GIS experience, you can still work with it. And if you're very advanced with both web design or with GIS, you can actually do a lot of really great stuff with it. So let's talk about how you get this thing started. So the first thing you're gonna have to do is log in to ArcGIS Online. And if you don't know how to log into ArcGIS Online, that's gonna be in separate videos, separate instructions. So get into ArcGIS Online and you're going to, and you're making sure that you're logging in through the CSUN access into ArcGIS Online, and click on this tab called Content. And what you do to start a story map is you do create, you click on this to create, and you're going to go down here and click on story maps. I suggest using a computer for this and not trying to work on a mobile device to try to create this, just because it's going to be a lot easier from a computer. Okay, in the story map template, this is how all story maps start. It's a blank template. You see it's a white background, and then we have to start entering in all of your content here. So there's some other resources that I'll post that are available online to tell you how to plan your story map. So often you're actually going to kind of just start it separate, like even on, with a piece of paper and a pencil, outlining what you want your story map to look like. So right here, this is going to be the title, and then you can have a short introduction or a subtitle here, and your name is going to appear here. That's always going to appear. And then you have options here to add a cover image, and that would be an image that appears up here at the top of the page. And then the key thing here is this plus symbol. That's when you hover your mouse over that, that's to add a content block. And so this is everything that you add that you saw in the previews, right? It comes from here. So if you click on this, then this is where you go to add text, a button like a hyperlinked button, separators, map. This is a web map that you previously already will have made in ArcGIS Online separately. Okay, you can add images, you can add an image gallery, video, audio, you can embed other content, you can do one of those swipe tools like a before and after photo. Those are all of our basic content. And we have some immersive interactive materials here like slideshows, sidecars, and map tours, right? I'm not gonna go into detail of what that means right now, but you can definitely try these out. You can play around with all of these things and options, and it's really not gonna break anything. I encourage you to just kind of explore and to see what happens when you add all of this stuff. So one thing to know about adding text that you should know is when you add text, you have different text options. That's the default is the paragraph, but you should know that there's heading and subheading and different other options here. All right, so if you just leave it at the default, which is a paragraph, this is a paragraph. When you highlight any text here, you get some additional options. You can do bold, you can italics, you can hyperlink that text, and you can also change the color of the text. All right, if you have typed something as one type of text and you need to change it, all you have to do is select that line and then click on this tab and you can change it to a different thing. And you don't need to even highlight the entire line, you just need to highlight part of that, what's on that line. All right, if you change it to a heading, this is really important. When anything that's a heading can be included in the navigation of your story map. And the navigation is accessed up here. If you click on the design button and you switch on the navigation here and close this box, and that means at the top of your story map there's going to be navigation buttons that will kind of link to anytime there's a new heading. So you want to be careful with this. You're going to use it effectively. You do not need a lot of headings here because they will just start filling up. You know, I'm just going to show you what happens if I do this. Change all of these to headings. They're all going to start showing up at the top here. So you do want to use them effectively. If you have a lot of different headings, then this navigation bar that's appearing at the top, that's going to fill up a lot. Okay. But basically you want to think of a story map like any kind of publication that you might, or a paper that you might have worked with, right? You're basically communicating a story or making an argument or demonstrating some kind of point, right? So you need an introduction, a body, and a conclusion. All right, now what you shouldn't do, don't just call the first part the introduction, because everybody knows that introduction is the first part. That heading, that first heading, probably should be something that's a little bit more descriptive. Like, let's say if we're going to make a tour of an interactive online tour of CSUN. All right, maybe we just want to call this Welcome to CSUN. And maybe we'll have something called points of interest. And maybe we'll have something called parking and transportation. All right, once we have that, you don't even have to have these three things, but it is usually a good idea to kind of outline what the different sections of your story map are going to be. And then you can either click on this button here to add more text, or if you're just at the end of a line, you can hit enter and it will take you to the next line, and it will just come up with a paragraph for you. So let's make a virtual tour of CSUN, or we'll at least kind of get started here. Often a really nice touch to add a cover image, or you can add a cover video that will play in the background. And so you can add your own photos here, and it's going to drop in a photo there. If you are using photos from other people that are not yours, you need to make sure that you provide attribution and that you are actually allowed to use them. So this is something that we always have to pay attention to when we create web-based materials, that you have permission to use those photos and things like that. All right, so I've added this picture of outside the Sierra Center at CSUN. I'm going to click add here, and you'll see that it's going to load, and we have a few options to customize things. And you got to know that with a story map, there's so many different ways to customize and make things look a little bit better, that you should really be thinking about how to do that. So once we add this, it's going to, sometimes it takes a minute to load. Now we have some options here. Now when you do this option, if you've added that image, it's going to try to load it in the best way it thinks it can. Basically, it's just going to center it. But if you want to draw your attention to another part of that image, you know, like maybe you want to have less of the sidewalk showing and more of the trees, you're basically going to click to recenter that image up here. So there you see that it's reloaded here. Now we've got some more options here. If you need to delete the image or just replace it, you can do that as well. Now before I continue, let's check out some design options. So if we click on design, we can change how that cover photo appears. We can do it full, right? So if you do as in the full style, that image is going to take up the first thing, and everything else you're going to scroll down and get to it. All right, you can do a side-by-side, which has the text and the image on the side, and you can even click this button to switch the placement of the photo. Or the default is to have that cover photo just at the top with the headline or the title of your story map below it. Now we have different themes that you can use also. That white background, that's the default theme, but we can have different themes, and these things are intended, you're supposed to ideally choose web design that is appropriate for your audience and for that type of documentation that you're using, right? So something that is supposed to be very serious and official, you do not want to use something very silly and playful. And something that's silly and playful, you probably don't want to use something that's really too serious. I'm going to click here up here. There are some more options here. Make sure you try this. This is your story settings. This, you have a few other options to show the publication date, the date of your last update, or to just hide the date. The default option is going to show you the day that you have published this. I'll talk about publishing here in just a second. So when you're working on a story map, when it's in this mode, only you can see it. So this other button up here for publish, this is sharing. So in ArcGIS Online, everything is private by default, meaning that only you can view that item when you're logged into your ArcGIS Online account. The other two options here are to share it as my organization, which means that only people who are logged in through a CSUN linked account can view this thing. And then if you do the third option, everyone public, that means anybody that has the link can just view this. There's no restrictions on it. With a story map, anytime you make a change, it's going to automatically save those changes. But once you publish it, if you go back and edit it once more, those new changes will not show up, and you have to go and publish it again for those changes to appear for anybody else who's looking at it. Okay, adding images into the story map itself, I'm just going to add that same image once more. If you hover your mouse over that image, you get a few options for how it's going to display. Depending on the original dimensions of that image, some of these options might be taken away. Like if it's a small image to begin with, you might not be allowed to show it as a large image. So you can change it to small, medium, large. You can also do what's called a float, which is going to stick that image there on the left side and allow you to put some text here on the right side. And usually you would kind of be writing something about what's going on related to that image here. When you're doing that, you see how my heading here is a little bit off center here. So you do need to make sure that you hit enter, and I would even publish it and then check this out in a different browser to make sure that the alignment is the way you want it to look. All right, let's say that you need to add a map. Now this is only if you have some previous work done in ArcGIS Online where you've created a web map with some data in it. When you click that, it's going to bring up any web map that's in your ArcGIS Online account, or that are in any groups that you're tagged in an ArcGIS Online. And you do get a little bit of customization options here. So however you styled that map previously, that styling or that symbology is going to show up here, but you get a few more customization options, such as which layers are actually going to show up here in the story map when it gets kind of brought into the story map. So make sure you check out all of these things, and just now you'll see that the caption here is just the title of your web map, and you probably will need to edit that title. The other option for adding a map is to create what they call a new express map. And an express map is something where you just create the map in the story map itself. So you can go through and kind of see those some of those instructions separately. But let's say, this is just kind of hand drawing a new map where you just have data. Well, it's not really data. It's just like you just kind of put the attributes or the annotations on the map itself. So this, when it's called an express map, it doesn't really exist outside of the story map. It only exists in the story map. Whereas in ArcGIS Online, you might have separate maps with map data that can be used in multiple applications. And so there you see that there's the express map that's been added to the story map. All right, this is a real basic intro to just starting the story map. Anytime you are ready to save this thing, you've got to publish it, and you publish it, and you make sure that this thing is saved for everyone. If you have embedded materials from elsewhere in your ArcGIS Online account that have different permission settings, you're going to need to update that for those maps or data to be available. So usually you want to click yes, share those items. It's going to publish the story, and once that happens, then you can copy the link. You can copy the URL, and usually the best way is just to go up here at the top of your new story map, and you know that you're ready to submit that URL when you have that link up here at the top to copy the story URL, and you just click on that and it copies to your clipboard, and then you can paste it into Canvas or however you need to turn in your story map.